Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of startAD Studio. Today, I'm joined by John, CEO and founder of Sook. I'm going to give him the floor to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm the founder of Sook. Sook is revolutionizing the way we interact with physical space in our towns and cities by renting spaces by the hour to all sorts of different occupiers. My background is all in real estate, so formerly at Sook, obviously, which merged with Aldar back in my Abu Dhabi days, and then latterly at Grosvenor in the UK.
Amazing. I actually want to touch on that a little bit. So at what point, so you were always in the corporate world. So at what point did you decide to shift and basically start Sook? When did this shift in your mind happen where you're like, you know what, I have this idea and I just want to branch out and start it?
Yeah, well, actually, I should say that even before coming to Abu Dhabi, I was in the army. So I had had a kind of different experience outside of the corporate world. But then, and that gave me a sort of sense of adventure, I guess, that wasn't really being satisfied when I came back to the UK. I'd always had a hankering to build something myself and to lead it. And really, it was just a case of when was I going to have the courage to take the leap, because very comfortable in my my corporate roles, and the catalyst for that actually was my wife had a lung transplant, and there's for anyone who's been through that kind of experience where someone very close to them is going through a life or death experience, it makes you reflect and gives you perspective. And in my case, it gave me the kind of the kick I needed to take a risk and go and start pursuing, I suppose, work adventures that really excited me, even though they were kind of scary.
It's admirable to see how you took trying times and used them to basically fuel your passion, which is amazing to see. Well, we know that the journey to entrepreneurship and the journey to building your own idea and making it a real thing is always a bumpy one, to say the least. So what was the biggest mistake that you're glad you made?
We've been lucky in that I don't think there are sort of any big mistakes. There are many, many small mistakes, which is part of the course. And I kind of see the early stage journey as just trying to make sure that those mistakes don't become big ones. But really, I don't regret any of the decisions we've made. But of course, there are things that we could have done better. I mean, we're also been very, very lucky rather than sort of unlucky in terms of making mistakes. You could have said that launching a retail business in the worst retail environment in living memory is a mistake, but actually it's been a huge opportunity for us, because one thing that the pandemic has done is made people think very differently about all sorts of different areas, and real estate in particular is very risk averse, very disinclined to make changes. So I feel really lucky that we've arrived at this moment where actually big asset managers, retailers and investors are all prepared to look at things in a totally different way. And that's all thanks to this pandemic that no one saw coming.
That's fascinating. So then from your experience, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to start their own startup? So what would be some low risk ways to navigate such a new market?
Well, I actually joined an accelerator, which was a 9-month program where I was paid, a small kind of stipend to keep me going during that time. And it was 9 months to think about solving problems. So the particular accelerator I joined was all about solving big social problems using tech. And that's a real luxury, having that opportunity to think. But it's also, I think, psychologically an important step. I needed to be all in. Lots of people, do a sort of side hustle whilst they've got full-time work. For me, I tried that previously, didn't really work for me. I needed to be completely committed to doing something different. And that accelerator gave me, I suppose, confidence in some ways to go down a path that at the very beginning is a real punt, even if you've got a great idea. Well, you were talking about mistakes in your last question. I mean, I've often looked at that accelerator as a bit of a mistake because it was expensive in terms of, actually, when I look back on it, I knew how to do all of those things that the accelerator helped me with. I didn't really need it. And I started off with giving away 8% of our business to that accelerator, which has now been reduced. But then, reflecting on it as part of the journey, sometimes that little bit of confidence or doing it in an environment where you're surrounded by other people doing crazy things, which makes you feel less alone, is a really helpful starting point, because that first step is the hardest one. And, just to give two kind of words of quotes that I've picked up along the way. I mean, the first that I stand by is this idea that if you've got a good idea and you care about it, then you should just jump, because the parachute will open. And the second one, which is a bit more of a word of warning and is an Elon Musk quote rather than my own, which is, he was asked what words of encouragement he'd give to an entrepreneur, and his response was, if you need words of encouragement, don't become an entrepreneur. And I think that's a really important warning, that there is no easy route to success. It's incredibly hard, and determination and energy are probably the two biggest factors at the beginning.
I love that Elon Musk quote. I feel like we should have it plastered in startAD Central. Yeah. So you have gone through accelerators before, but I'm sure you've also been approached by, or have approached partners, the one-way method where you just go directly to them. So have you noticed any differences in partnering with large organizations in a sprint accelerator model like Scale Up was versus through direct engagement? Well,
of course, there's a structure, and startAD is really the first big sort of corporate accelerator that we've been part of. We've done lots of interesting programs with academic organizations like the University of Oxford, but what startAD is doing is actually quite unusual in terms of a structured approach to generate new partnerships, and I applaud that. I mean, most of what we've done is go directly, and that is incredibly challenging because you don't know who you should be talking to in this big faceless organization, and it takes a lot of energy to kick the first door down to the right person who's actually going to say yes. The flip side of that is, if someone says no, you know that you can attack that organization from lots of different angles, which, going through a structured process is less easy because people get annoyed with you. But one of a characteristic that I think all entrepreneurs should have is being prepared to pester and not give up, and when one door doesn't open, go through another. And I have also been prepared to completely leverage all my network, all of my team's network, and I'm lucky to have that network. So that's why it's great things like startAD exist, because not everyone has a link into an organization that they want to partner with.
Wonderful. And Scale Up was your first basically introduction to this side of the world as Sook, right? So I know you've lived here before, but Sook hasn't had any business going on in this region yet, right?
We haven't got any spaces open, but we have active conversations in the region. Well, I was just saying they haven't really progressed, partly because it's hard, and we've got a lot of focus in the UK. Scale Up is the first, I suppose the most progressed we've got, although we'll find out whether or not we actually get selected for a pilot in due course.
Mm-hmm. And then how do you see Sook actually transforming retail in the UAE?
Well, vacancy is an issue across the UAE, no matter what asset managers say publicly. And increasingly, the way that asset managers traditionally engage with occupiers is going to change. We provide a service that drives much greater access to all sorts of different occupiers on terms that work much better for them, for those asset managers, and help them, I suppose, navigate outside of the traditional norms that they're used to by being flexible without completely kind of ripping their own model up. And that's what we want to do. The UAE loves retail. It is the home of the biggest shopping mall in the world. And there is tons of retail throughout all of the Emirates, but particularly Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So, we want to be facilitating access into those markets for all sorts of exciting new brands, esports, wellness, startups. I mean, I think that's a key one. The startup community in the UAE is perhaps not as advanced as London, where I'm from, because there was a lot of red tape across the UAE for many years until quite recently. And so navigating it been much harder. But now with local ownership rules relaxing, and an appetite for embracing smaller startups arriving, and an understanding of the power and the richness of kind of culture that brings, I think we're the perfect vehicle to help those startups thrive in retail environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Sook is very outside of the box thinking, and it's just a matter of getting people to really just see outside the box and see the possibilities of these spaces. And it is quite interesting to see.
Well, obviously I think that, because I think it's brilliant, but it's very obvious. And as often many good ideas are, we all know that wherever you are, in whether it's Abu Dhabi or Aberdeen, a Monday and a Saturday are completely different places. So this idea that we have the same retail offering static across 7 days doesn't actually make any sense. And when you factor in the fact that shops no longer need to be distribution channels for stuff, because we can all get everything delivered to our door, suddenly there's a whole massive opportunity to repurpose retail assets in a way that actually makes more money anyway. So it's an obvious no-brainer. It's just that Sook is championing it and at the forefront of this change.
And it's amazing to see, and we're really excited to see how Sook will grow, especially in this region, so we can see it with our own eyes. So I have a quick question, actually. Where did the name Sook come from?
Well, obviously I love the Middle East. Before my time in Abu Dhabi, I served in the British Army, and I actually was sent away to learn Arabic for 6 months before spending a lot of time in Iraq. And so I love Arabic, and Sook, is actually not a particularly common word in the UK. Obviously in the Emirates, everyone understands what it means. But I wanted to talk about, I wanted a business that represented all of the day-to-day activities that you would expect in an ancient Sook, everything from the dentist to retailer, and the Sook is the place where life happens, and that's exactly what we want to happen in all of our spaces. Not just be about retail, but be about amenity, wellness, education, or just hanging out as a community. And so Sook felt like the perfect name, and then I just spelt it incorrectly because we're a tech business, and that's what you do.
But it's really nice to see how you've gone back to the roots of the word, where you're seeing as Sook really was where you got everything done, literally from you got your medical care done, but you also got your shopping done. Everything was done in the Sook, which is quite interesting to see, especially since you've started it in the UK. Yeah. So I love that. So my last question to you is, what's up and exciting in the world of Sook?
Well, we're working towards an opening of our first space in Montreal, in Canada, mm-hmm. which I think will be our first international site, depending on progress with the Scale Up program, because maybe it's the UAE, we shall see. We've just gone through £1 million in sales, which is a huge milestone for us, because of course the last year UK retail, in fact, only reopened 1 year ago today. So to be able to do all of those sales in that time, in fact, we're at about 1.2, I think, million, so about £100,000 a month, is just super exciting. And we want to treble that number over the next year. So that's obviously a really important proof point for any business making sales and proving that they can be consistent. And I'm also excited about some of the brands that we're partnering with, who I can't talk about, but there are some really exciting names who are not traditional retailers necessarily, but who want to use physical spaces for all sorts of amazing things. So that is super cool. But yeah, hopefully, one of the hugely exciting things about this year will be being in the region where we've got interesting conversations in Qatar. And obviously as a football fan, I'm very excited about trying to spend time in Qatar. And I'm very excited about potentially being open in Abu Dhabi and Dubai this year.
Amazing. Well, we're so excited for you, and we're really looking forward to seeing Sook grow. We do have you on all our socials, so we are going to keep an eye on Sook's growth. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tina.